I ask
Yeah.
someone a question? Eric, can I ask you a question? What was our great, 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 great...
He was the toughest nut to crack, and not so easily impressed. A single yes or no from him decided your fate. But the most feared Simon Cowell has been fated with a struggle too big for him. Recently, the buzz around town is that his son has been diagnosed with something tragic. For the first time, it seems Simon is the one saying goodbye. And this time, it is painfully real. What's really going on with Simon Cowell? For a long time, Simon Cowell wasn't just a judge on television shows. He was a force of nature. From American Idol to Britain's Got Talent, Simon built his name on being blunt, controversial, and unapologetic. With a single sentence, he could make or break a career, and viewers loved him for it. People tuned in expecting the arched eyebrow, the blunt remarks, and that unwavering confidence. He was television's gatekeeper, and he wore that title like it was made just for him. But lately, there's been a subtle shift in Simon, and it has not gone unnoticed. More and more people are beginning to sense that something about him just is not the same. He still gives his familiar little smile like he used to, but something about his smile and energy doesn't sit well with longtime fans. It didn't stop there. He's no longer as sarcastic as he used to be, and fans have noticed this change is not just in what he says, it's also reflected in how he acts now. These days, Simon chooses his words more carefully, and every time a child steps on stage, something in him seems to light up. One moment that fans remembered vividly happened during a performance on America's Got Talent. Michael Ketterer, a father of 6, sang a very emotional tribute to his children, and something about the moment stirred some emotions up in Simon. It was not just the song that moved Simon, it was Michael's love for his children, many of whom he adopted from foster care. For Simon, who became a father later in life, the performance seemed to reach a personal place, and that came through clearly in how Simon responded. At first, many assumed his change was due to stress or simple exhaustion. After decades in the spotlight, it would be natural for Simon to slow down. But this feels like more than fatigue. Over the past year, he has appeared in fewer interviews and skipped more red carpets than usual. And when questions come up about his family, especially his son Eric, Simon tends to steer the conversation elsewhere. And that silence hasn't gone unnoticed. It is this silence that has sparked countless conversations. Some fans think his engagement to Lauren brought out a softer side. Others wonder if he's still recovering, maybe from health scares or his recent cosmetic procedures. But the theory that keeps popping up, the one people keep circling back to in online threads and late-night fan gossip, hits a little closer to the heart. Many believe that Simon's change has everything to do with fatherhood. Not because something is necessarily wrong, but because being a father may be shaping his life more than anyone realizes. In past interviews, Simon often spoke about Eric with pride, describing how fatherhood transformed him, especially after the loss of his own parents. Photos of the two smiling backstage were once the highlight of his public image, but lately, that warmth has grown quiet. There are no recent updates, no playful anecdotes, no candid father-son moments shared with the world. Instead, there has been a slow pull away from the spotlight. And in today's world that people are very active online, people notice even the slightest change. Lately, it seems Simon has taken his eyes off face and has switched that attention to family. It's even more obvious when his son's name, Eric, is mentioned. There is this unmistakable but strange glint in his eyes. According to razor-sharp-eyed observers, this points that things may not entirely be right. We may not know entirely what's going with him behind the scenes, but it seems more shocking than we can imagine. But to understand the silent transformation we're seeing now, we have to go back. Before the fame, before the spotlight. Who was Simon Cowell, and what shaped the man we admire today? Before the fame. Simon Cowell's early years. Simon Philip Cowell was born on October 7, 1959, in Lambeth, London. His parents had an early and strong influence in his choice of career later on in life, as they were heavily involved in the entertainment industry. The Cowells lived comfortably and placed a high value on appearances, but even with that privilege, young Simon often felt more pressure than freedom, especially growing up with his father's other children from past relationships. Simon struggled all through school. After attending Radlett Preparatory School, he spent a year at licensed Victuallers School in Ascot, then moved on to boarding at Dover College. There, he passed his GCE O-levels in English language and literature, but was expelled around the age of 16, and you won't believe why. According to reports, Simon got in trouble for painting the walls of his dorm room and setting off a prank that tampered with the school's security system. The staff saw it as unacceptable behavior. But for Simon, it was less about breaking rules and more about expressing frustration. In his mind, it was just one more reminder that he did not fit into their world, and maybe never would. He later enrolled at Windsor Technical College, where he took another GCE, this time in sociology. But Simon had already lost interest in school and no longer saw the point. He didn't care for rules or authority figures who didn't understand him. He wasn't interested in fitting into a system that didn't fit him. At this point, he made a decision which, well, given his history, wasn't surprising. He left Windsor College. Simon found himself hopping between jobs, still figuring out where he truly belonged. He worked as a runner on Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, spent time in an estate agency, and with the help of his father, he later landed in the mailroom at Electric and Musical Industry, popularly known as EMI. None of these roles were glamorous, but they gave Simon something even more important: a front-row seat to the music industry. He saw how the music business really worked. He learned how people made deals, how artists were shaped for success, and most importantly, how to listen before speaking. By the early 1980s, Simon had started building his career in music. After gaining experience at EME, he took a leap and co-founded E&S Music. Soon after, he partnered with Ian Burton to launch Fanfare Records. The label found success with catchy pop hits like Sinita's So Macho and Robson and Jerome's version of Unchained Melody. For a while, it seemed like Simon had finally found his footing. But in 1989, everything came crashing down. Fanfare folded, and Simon lost nearly everything. He had to move back in with his parents, a step backward that could have crushed many. But he never spoke about it publicly. But rather, he slowly picked up the broken pieces, but with an even stronger resolve to fight for the life he thought he deserved. Even back then, Simon was already learning how to manage his own story. Whether it was being expelled from school or watching a company fail, he responded the same way. He stayed calm, quiet, and focused. He rarely showed emotion. He avoided sympathy. That habit of holding things in and pushing forward would become one of his defining traits, and a big part of how the world came to know him. His well-known quote from a later interview, "I don't like backup plans. If you have one, it means you're planning to fail," says a lot. On the surface, it sounds like pure confidence, but if you listen closely, there is something deeper behind those words. Simon was not just building a business. He was carefully shaping how the world saw him. Every detail, every move, every public moment was thought through. This level of control helped him climb to the top of talent television, where timing, confidence, and first impressions could make or break a career. So when we see him now, more reflective and open with his emotions, it is not all that surprising. Simon Cowell has always been careful with his words. When he stays quiet, it usually means he is thinking. And when someone like him finally speaks, people listen. The instinct to hold back did not happen by chance. It was shaped early in life, in a home where pressure often spoke louder than comfort, and silence felt like the safest way to cope. But what happens when a man known for staying behind the scenes suddenly becomes the face of television? Let's dive into how Simon stepped out, took control, and redefined fame itself. The life Simon controlled before love found him. By the late 1990s, Simon Cowell was no longer just another name in the British music industry. He had built a reputation not by chasing fame, but by understanding what young audiences craved. He had figured out the formula: find a group with the right sound, pair them with a catchy song, and promote them with bold, unapologetic confidence. While working at Bertelsmann Music Group, Simon played a key role in developing boy bands like Five. He also supported the early rise of Westlife, whose smooth vocals and polished image quickly won over teenage fans across Europe. These groups were more than popular. They were chart toppers, selling millions of records and becoming household names. But even with all that success building around him, Simon was still changing. Behind the scenes, he stayed careful and focused, always managing how much of himself the world was allowed to see. The spotlight belonged to the artists. Simon was fine staying in the background, making the decisions, shaping the stars. He was in control, and he liked it that way. But that silent control was not going to last. Things took a drastic turn when Pop Idol launched in the United Kingdom, followed not long after by American Idol in the United States. These shows were not just about finding singers. They were about finding personalities. And Simon quickly became the one audiences could not look away from. He was no longer the man working behind the curtain. He became the main character. Viewers tuned in week after week, not just for the performances, but to see what Simon would say next. Simon became famous for saying what others would not. His bluntness shocked viewers, but it also felt honest. People laughed, winced, and kept watching. Some thought he was cruel. Others saw brilliance. Either way, his sharp words made him unforgettable. But behind that bold voice was a man guarding his privacy. While other stars shared their lives in interviews, Simon stayed silent. Off camera, friends described him as generous but distant. He might always be on the spotlight, but Simon's real life was carefully, quietly protected. At the peak of his career, Simon seemed untouched by traditional expectations. He joked about marriage. He dismissed the idea of children. Work always came first. In a world where celebrities constantly shared personal details, Simon did the opposite. The more he held back, the more curious people became. But that distance was not just for show. It was how he protected himself. From early on, Simon learned that staying in control was the safest way to survive. Behind the scenes, Simon Cowell was not just producing shows. He was building something much bigger. Shows like The X Factor was not your typical talent show. It was part competition, part emotional spectacle, and it drew in millions of viewers. Each week, contestants poured their hearts out on stage, and Simon sat right in the middle, deciding who stays and who leaves. But his role had changed. He was no longer just giving feedback, he was launching careers. Through The X Factor, the world was introduced to artists like Leona Lewis, Little Mix, and even One Direction, who became global superstars. Susan Boyle, discovered through a similar format, became a household name almost overnight. By the early 2010s, Simon was no longer just someone people watched on television. He had become a powerful name around the world. He owned homes in London, Beverly Hills, and Barbados. He flew on private jets and signed contracts worth millions of dollars. His shows were everywhere, and his influence stretched across music and television. But the truth is, success can only protect you for so long. Sooner or later, even the strongest walls begin to crack. Because just when Simon thought he had everything under control, he met someone who would turn his world upside down in the most unexpected way. Beyond the spotlight. How fatherhood rewrote Simon's story. In February 2014, something changed in Simon Cowell's world. While many were out celebrating Valentine's Day with flowers and dinner reservations, Simon spent his time in a hospital room at Lenox Hill in New York. That morning, he became a father. His son, Eric, was born without the media frenzy that usually followed anything tied to Simon's name. Just a few hours before the birth, Simon had been filming Britain's Got Talent in London. But the moment Lauren Silverman called, he got on a plane and made it just in time. Eric was born to Simon and his now fiancée, Lauren, whom he began dating around 2013. At the time, their relationship made headlines, not only because Simon was famously private, but because Lauren was still married when the news broke. It sparked a lot of drama on social media, the kind that usually follows celebrity scandal. But inside that hospital room, none of it mattered. There were no flashing cameras or reporters, just Simon, Lauren, and their newborn son. Later, in an interview with Extra, Simon said something few expected from the famously sharp judge. "I was born to be a dad." And for a man who never wanted children to begin with, that kind of vulnerable joy was new. The moment wasn't just life-changing, it was grounding. For the first time in a long while, Simon Cowell wasn't thinking about ratings or headlines. He was just a man holding his son. He named his son after his own father, Eric Cowell Sr., a man Simon admired deeply but rarely spoke about in public. It was more than just a name. It felt like a quiet bridge between generations, a way to show love and honor without needing to explain it. Over time, people began to notice a different side of Simon. In interviews, he spoke more openly, saying that becoming a father gave his life a new sense of purpose and meaning, something he had never expected to experience. Here is where things begin to get interesting. For years, Simon helped young talents step into the spotlight. But when it came to his son, he made a very different choice. There were no reality show appearances or magazine photo shoots. He kept Eric out of the spotlight, away from the media chaos. It was a decision that felt very different from the public life Simon was known for. Still, now and then, we caught glimpses. Eric holding his father's hand at a fundraiser, sitting backstage during a show, smiling in the audience beside his dad. And in those rare moments, it was clear. Simon was not just showing up. He was gentle, present, and proud. But there was also a sense that he was being careful, as if he was protecting something precious, something he wanted to grow far from flashing lights. Slowly, people began to see less of Eric, and his absence didn't go unnoticed. This led to speculations, and questions began to swirl. Was Simon simply being protective, or was there something else happening behind the scenes? He never shared too much, and that careful approach got people wondering. Could Eric be facing something personal, Something that made Simon want to shield him from the spotlight? A few fans even floated the idea that Eric might be navigating developmental challenges, maybe even autism. But nothing was ever confirmed, and Simon has never spoken directly about it. People could not help but notice and talk about the changes. Some even go as far as dropping comments asking about Eric's whereabouts under nearly every photo Simon posts on social media. They also picked up on the way he talks about his son with so much love, but always in a protective way. What stood out most was not the rumors, but how Simon carried himself. Every time he spoke about Eric, his words were soft, thoughtful, and filled with care. It did not stop there. People grew even more curious when, years later, Simon began stepping back from certain projects. He stopped talking so much about ratings or new television deals. Instead, his focus quietly shifted. He started spending more time at home, choosing to be more present in Eric's life. In 2021, during a rare interview, someone asked him what kind of legacy he wanted to leave behind. He did not mention fame, success, or the shows that made him a household name. Instead, he said something simple. He just wanted Eric to be proud of him. That was not a celebrity talking. That was a father speaking from the heart. And in that moment, people saw just how much Simon had changed. He was no longer chasing the next big moment. He was trying to become someone his son would admire. The quiet exit, when fame no longer fit. At first, people thought Simon Cowell was just slowing down. After years of non-stop work, long hours, and global success, it seemed normal. By his early 60s, the tough TV mogul was choosing a calmer life. He chose a calmer life because he wanted to. Fame just did not hold the same thrill anymore. What mattered most now was something closer to home, his son, Eric. However, the change did not happen overnight. In 2020, Simon had an accident at his Malibu home that left him with a serious back injury and forced him to rest for months. For the first time in years, he stepped away from his demanding schedule and found himself in a rare moment of calm. With work on hold and no pressure from the media, he finally had space to think about what mattered most. Simon had long said that becoming a father gave his life new meaning, and that Eric helped him find peace after losing both his parents. Still, it was the accident that truly made him slow down. In the months that followed, he reduced his professional commitments and began taking Fridays off just to be with his son. Here's the truth: Simon never resigned or officially left the entertainment industry. He simply began choosing home over headlines. Fans started to notice. His television appearances became less frequent, and when he did show up, he seemed more relaxed and more grounded. He was no longer chasing the spotlight. He just wanted to be a good and present father. The change in Simon's life is what started to stir some of the speculation. Online, people began to wonder if there was more to his absence. But no confirmation ever came. And maybe that silence says enough. The truth is, Simon's transformation has always spoken for itself. He did not change for attention. He changed for the kind of love that quietly reshapes everything. In 2025, Simon has spoken openly about the challenges of parenting in today's digital world. He has shared real concerns about raising a child surrounded by screens, social media, and constant distractions. That is part of why he has chosen to slow down. Not because his son has any disability, but because he wants to be present. His focus is not on protecting Eric from fame, but from the pressures that come with growing up in such a fast and overwhelming world. These thoughtful, protective instincts were never part of how the world saw Simon before. But now, They are at the heart of who he is. Still, the speculations did not end there. In late 2023, something else happened that got people talking again at a charity event. Simon and Eric were seen together in public for the first time in years. It was supposed to be a casual event with no media or red carpets, but somehow words slipped to the media. And before you know it, the moment sparked new conversations. Some people at the event noticed how Simon kept a steady hand on Eric's back, gently guiding him through the crowd. For a few, that small gesture seemed to confirm the lingering speculation that Eric might be on the autism spectrum. But others saw something different. They believed it was simply a father being watchful, making sure his son felt safe in a busy, watchful space, without the need for labels or speculation. It didn't matter what people believed. The moment just hits differently. It made fans stop and really pay attention. All the rumors people had been circling suddenly felt smaller from what was right in front of us. A father showing real love in a way that felt deeply genuine. There has never been any official diagnosis or public confirmation. The questions people have asked over the years have never been answered directly. What we have seen instead is Simon staying close, showing up with calm, steady care, and slowly stepping back from the spotlight for reasons that seem deeply personal. This is not the kind of farewell marked by interviews or dramatic announcements. It is something softer, more meaningful. It shows in how he spends his time, in how his focus has shifted. Simon Cowell, the man once defined by sharp critiques and unstoppable drive, now moves with more intention. His world looks different, and he is not rushing to explain why. He does not need to. The way he lives now says more than any headline ever could. Simon may not have vanished from the spotlight, but his priorities have clearly changed. So what does his life look like today, and what legacy is he slowly shaping? Present life and legacies. Simon Cowell's name may no longer dominate weekly entertainment headlines, but his influence is deeply embedded in the very fabric of modern television shows and the entertainment industry as a whole. Though the spotlight is less intense around him now, the imprint he left behind is unmistakable. He is no longer chasing ratings or building new empires. Instead, he is seeking something far more personal: balance. His recent Netflix docuseries, Simon Cowell: The Next Act, offers a rare glimpse into that new rhythm. While it still follows his journey to discover emerging talent, the show also leans into something more reflective. Viewers see Simon not just as a producer or judge, but as a mentor and father. The series steers away from spectacle and leans into sincerity. For fans who once knew him as television's sharpest critic, they now see someone who listens more carefully, laughs more freely, and shares the spotlight rather than standing in it alone. Simon's legacy, of course, is difficult to overstate. He helped launch the careers of global sensations like One Direction, Leona Lewis, Susan Boyle, and Little Mix. The reality shows he co-created, including Pop Idol, The X Factor, and Got Talent, transformed reality television and have been replicated across dozens of countries. These shows not only entertained millions, they also redefined what stardom looked like in the digital age. Even though he plays a quieter role today, his creative footprint still shapes much of what we see on talent-based television. Over the years, Simon Cowell's work has been recognized on some of the world's biggest stages. In both 2004 and 2010, Time magazine included him in its prestigious list of the 100 most influential people in the world, acknowledging his global influence on entertainment. And by 2006, British audiences weighed in too, placing him at number 28 in ITV's television poll, TV's 50 Greatest Stars, a nod to how deeply his presence had shaped popular culture. Additionally, National Television Awards presented him with the Special Recognition Award in 2008. It didn't end there. In 2010, the cultural magazine New Statesman added him to their roundup of the 50 people who matter, marking him as someone who had helped define the character of modern Britain. And finally, in 2018, the entertainment world gave a more permanent salute. Simon was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in the television category, cementing his place in show business history. Even beyond the world of entertainment, Simon Cowell's influence has been recognized in broader cultural discussions. In 2012, he was featured in BBC Radio 4's The New Elizabethans, a documentary series that celebrated individuals who helped shape Britain during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. A panel made up of historians and journalists selected Cowell not for political achievements, but for the profound impact he had through popular culture. They argued that his ability to shape taste, define trends, and influence the entertainment landscape placed him among those who helped define an entire era of British life. Despite the public honors and global recognition, Simon Cowell's focus has shifted. His son Eric, now stepping into his teenage years, has remained mostly outside the media's lens. Despite all the rumors and speculations, there has never been any confirmation or official explanation. What has been consistent, though, is Simon's deliberate effort to protect Eric's privacy, making sure his son gets to experience something many children in the spotlight never do: a childhood that unfolds away from flashing cameras. Today, when Simon speaks about what matters most, the tone is different. There is a calm in his voice when he talks about school runs, breakfast routines, and being present in ways he never was before. He once said parenthood was not just another chapter in his life. It was like starting a completely different book. A life filled with everyday moments, like sitting together at the table or walking side by side, that now seem to carry more meaning than anything the red carpet ever offered. Considering he became a father later in life, it is deeply understandable that he approaches it with a quiet intensity and a sense of purpose. This is not about stepping away from something, but about stepping fully into something new. Simon Cowell's journey reminds us that real transformation does not always come with a grand finale. Sometimes it happens quietly, outside of the camera's view. His emotional farewell was never really about leaving fame behind. It was about stepping into something more lasting. While television built his empire, it was fatherhood that gave him meaning. And in choosing presence over performance, Simon has left behind not just a legacy in entertainment, but one deeply rooted in family and love. Did fame shape who Simon Cowell really is? Or was it fatherhood that revealed his true legacy? And if love changed his path, how should we now remember the man behind the spotlight? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.